Give us the papers, Brynlee. We're just trying to help. My mother-in-law Margaret's voice was honey-coated venom. Her designer-clad arms crossed over her chest as she stood in my office. Behind her, my father-in-law Thomas nodded solemnly, his silver hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows of the business I'd built from nothing. I kept my expression carefully neutral, the same mask of polite deference I'd perfected over 4 years of marriage to their son, Richard. I appreciate your concern, but I don't need help running my company. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Concern? Margaret's perfectly lined lips curled into what might have looked like a smile to anyone who didn't know her. This isn't just concern, dear. It's practically an intervention. The Blackwell name is attached to this little project of yours now. Little project. I suppressed the urge to laugh. My little project was a software security firm that had doubled its revenue every year since inception. A firm that I'd built with my own hands, my own mind, my own sweat and tears, long before I'd ever met their precious son. Richard is concerned, Thomas finally spoke, his deep voice carrying the weight of old money and older entitlement. The hours you've been keeping, the risks you're taking with new clients, it's not sustainable. He adjusted his gold cufflinks, a nervous habit I'd noticed whenever he was lying. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. Richard and me on our wedding day, his arm possessively around my waist, his family's historic Virginia estate forming a picture-perfect backdrop. He'd seemed so different then. Supportive, proud of my ambition. Or perhaps I'd just been willing to believe the facade. Richard hasn't mentioned any concerns to me, I said carefully, turning back to my in-laws. In fact, he was celebrating our new defense contract with me just last night. Margaret waved her hand dismissively, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Men don't always express their worries directly, Brynlee. That's why we're here. She reached into her Hermes handbag and pulled out a thick document bound in expensive leather. These papers simply restructure Sentinel security under the Blackwell Group umbrella. For tax purposes, mainly. Tax purposes. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing outright. The Blackwells hadn't built their fortune by paying taxes. They'd built it by consuming smaller companies exactly like mine. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It would give Richard peace of mind, Thomas added, his tone softening to what I'd come to recognize as his closing voice, the one he used to seal business deals over brandy and cigars. And it would relieve you of so much pressure. You could focus on the technical side, leave the business decisions to those with more experience. I stood up slowly, straightening the sleeves of my blazer. I appreciate your visit, but I have a meeting in 5 minutes with the Department of Defense. A meeting I arranged, negotiated, and will close without any help from the Blackwell name. Margaret's smile tightened. Don't be difficult, Brynlee. Richard told us about the cash flow problems. We know you've been struggling. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I hadn't told Richard about the temporary cash crunch we were experiencing while waiting for government contracts to process. I'd mentioned it only yesterday to my CFO Zara in the privacy of this very office. There are no problems, I lied smoothly. And if there were, they wouldn't require selling my company to fix them. Thomas stepped forward, placing the leather folio on my desk. Just look it over, for Richard's sake. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Family dinner on Sunday. We can finalize everything then. They left with the practiced grace of people accustomed to getting their way, closing my office door with a soft click that somehow sounded more threatening than a slam. The moment they were gone, I picked up my secure phone. Not the one Richard had given me for our anniversary, but the one only 3 people in the world had the number to. Maya, I said when my assistant answered, cancel my afternoon and get Zara in here immediately. I paused, watching through my window as my in-laws climbed into their chauffeur-driven Bentley. We have a mole. The security sweep took 2 hours. Every inch of my office, every electronic device, every potential hiding spot for listening devices was examined by Sentinel's best security team, people I'd personally recruited from the NSA and private security firms. Clean, announced Raj, our head of physical security, packing away his equipment. But I'd recommend a daily sweep from now on. I nodded, turning to Zara, who'd been silently watching the proceedings from my office sofa. At 38, Zara Abadi was 15 years my senior, with the kind of financial acumen that had saved us from bankruptcy twice in our early days. She'd believed in Sentinel when it was just me working out of my garage apartment. She was also the only person besides my lawyer who knew about the trust fund. Who talked? I asked once Raj had left, closing the door behind him. Zara shook her head, her dark curls bouncing slightly. No one on my team. The cash flow discussion never left this room. Then it's either my office that's bugged or Richard is spying on you, Zara finished bluntly. I walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline, the afternoon sun glinting off the sound in the distance. He wants my company, Zara. They all do. The timing is suspicious, she agreed. Right when we're about to announce the Pentagon contract. The contract that would put Sentinel security firmly on the map. The contract that would triple our valuation overnight. The contract I'd worked 80-hour weeks for months to secure. I need to know how much Richard knows, I said, turning back to face her. And I need to know if he's working with them willingly or if they're manipulating him too. Zara raised an eyebrow. You still believe he might be on your side? I thought about last night. Richard bringing home champagne to celebrate the contract. Rumor he'd heard from a friend in the industry. His sudden interest in the details of my work. The way he'd scrolled through his phone while I slept beside him. No, I admitted. But I need proof before I make my move. Zara nodded, understanding instantly. How long do we have? Sunday dinner. 4 days. I picked up the leather folio Thomas had left, flipping through complex legal documents designed to strip me of everything I'd built. They expect me to sign this over roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. And if you don't, I closed the folio with a snap. Then I suspect the Blackwells will show their true colors. Zara stood, smoothing her pencil skirt. I'll have the financial contingencies ready by tomorrow. But Brynlee, she hesitated. Are you prepared to use the trust fund, after all this time? My grandfather's face flashed in my mind. Stern, loving, paranoid about the fortune he'd built. Trust no one with both your heart and your money, he'd told me on his deathbed. One of them will always be betrayed. I'd established Sentinel using only my savings from 5 years at Microsoft, deliberately keeping my inheritance separate, hidden. Property, investments, and liquid assets in a labyrinthine structure of blind trusts and offshore accounts that not even my husband of 4 years knew existed. Not yet, I told Zara. First, I need to understand what game the Blackwells are playing, and whether Richard is a player or just another piece on their board. Richard came home late that night, loosening his Hermes tie as he walked into our penthouse overlooking Lake Washington. I was waiting, curled on our Italian leather sofa, a glass of his favorite whiskey prepared exactly as he liked it. Rough day? I asked, rising to greet him with a practiced smile and the crystal tumbler. He took the glass, kissing my cheek absently. Budget meetings. Boring as hell, but necessary. He took a long sip. How was yours? Any progress on that contract? I watched, his face carefully. Still waiting to hear. These things take time. Of course. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure it'll work out. Richard Blackwell had been Seattle's most eligible bachelor when we met. Harvard Business School, jaw like it was carved from marble, old money that stretched back to railroad tycoons. He'd pursued me relentlessly after we met at a tech conference, where I was speaking. I'd resisted at first, wary of exactly this scenario, a powerful family looking to expand their empire through marriage. But he'd been persistent, charming, seemingly impressed by my independence. "I love that you built something on your own," he'd told me on our third date. "No family connections, no safety net, just raw talent and determination." How ironic those words seemed now. "Your parents stopped by my office today," I said casually, watching him over the rim of my wine glass. Richard froze momentarily, then continued removing his cufflinks. "Really? They didn't mention they were planning to see you." Lie number 1. "They had some concerns about Sentinel," I continued. "Suggested I might consider selling to Blackwell Group." He laughed, the sound too forcefully casual. "My parents are always looking to expand. Don't take it personally." Lie number 2. "They brought papers," I pressed. "Already drawn up. Very comprehensive." Richard walked to the bar cart, refilling his whiskey. When he turned back, his expression was carefully concerned. "That does sound a bit presumptuous, even for them. What did you tell them?" "That I'd think about it." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Really? That's surprising." I shrugged, setting down my barely touched wine. The timing might be right, with the market so volatile and tech stocks taking a hit. "Exactly," Richard said too quickly. "That's exactly what Dad's been saying. It could be the perfect time to shelter under the Blackwell umbrella." He sat beside me, taking my hand in his. "I know how much Sentinel means to you, Bryn. But maybe this is the smart play. You'd still be involved, of course." "Of course," I echoed, squeezing his hand while fighting the urge to recoil. "I just need to review the paperwork carefully. Make sure it's fair." Richard's thumb stroked my wrist. "I can have our family lawyers look it over for you. They'll make sure everything's in order." I forced a grateful smile. "That would be wonderful, but I'll still have my team review it too." Something flashed behind his eyes, irritation, quickly masked. "Whatever makes you comfortable. Just don't let pride get in the way of good business sense." He kissed my forehead, an oddly patronizing gesture. "I'm going to shower before dinner." As soon as the bathroom door closed, I slipped into our home office and accessed the hidden camera I'd installed that morning. A quick scroll through the footage showed Richard on the phone in here while I was out getting lunch, speaking in low tones. "She took the papers?" "No, I don't know if she'll sign." "Yes, I understand what's at stake." "I'll make sure it happens." I downloaded the footage to my secure cloud server, then erased all traces of the camera from our home system. My husband wanted my company, his parents had drafted the takeover documents, and someone had leaked confidential financial information from my office. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture I'd secretly dreaded since the day I said "I do" to Richard Blackwell. Later, as we lay in bed, Richard's breathing. Steady with sleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, mentally reviewing my options. The Blackwells were powerful, one of Seattle's oldest families, with connections throughout the business world, politics, and high society. But they didn't know about my grandfather's vast fortune, carefully hidden from public records. They didn't know that the woman they were trying to strong-arm had resources that could rival their own. They saw only what I'd allowed them to see, a self-made entrepreneur who'd married above her station. My phone vibrated softly on the nightstand, a text from Zara. "Found something. Office, 7 a.m. I replaced the phone carefully and closed my eyes, not sleeping but planning. Sunday was 4 days away. By then, I needed to understand exactly what the Blackwells were plotting, secure my company against their attack, and decide once and for all whether my marriage was worth saving. And if it wasn't, if Richard was truly his parents' son, then the Blackwells would learn what happened when they underestimated Brynlee Keller. I arrived at Sentinel headquarters at 6:30 the next morning, before most of the staff. The building, a converted warehouse in Seattle's Georgetown district that I'd purchased and renovated 2 years ago, was largely empty, security lights still glowing in the dawn dimness. Maya, my executive assistant, was already at her desk, outside my office looking fresh despite the early hour. At 26, she was only 2 years younger than me, with the kind of ruthless efficiency that made her invaluable. "Ms. Abadi is waiting in your office," she said, handing me a steaming cup of black coffee. "And I've cleared your calendar until noon as requested." "Any calls from Richard?" "Not yet. But Mrs. Blackwell left a message asking if you'd reviewed the documents." Of course she had. Margaret Blackwell wasn't known for her patience. "Tell her I'm in meetings all day," I instructed, taking a sip of the perfect coffee. "And Maya, I need you to pull the visitor logs for the past month. Every person who's been in this building, especially around the executive floor." She nodded, not asking why. That was the thing about Maya. She never needed the full picture to execute perfectly. "Would you like me to cross-reference with Richard's schedule?" Smart. That's why I'd hired her straight out of her MBA program, outbidding 3 tech giants for her talents. Yes, and any of his close friends or family members. Inside my office, Zara was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sunrise paint the Seattle skyline in shades of orange and pink. She turned as I entered, her expression serious. "What did you find?" I asked, setting my coffee on the desk. She placed a tablet in front of me. "The Blackwells are in trouble." I scrolled through the financial documents she'd compiled. The Blackwell Group, the family's holding company, was over-leveraged, with massive loans coming due in the next 6 months. "They're asset-rich but cash-poor," Zara explained. 3. Consecutive failed investments in Richard's division have drained their liquidity. They need cash, or they'll have to start selling off core holdings. "And Sentinel just landed a $50 million government contract," I murmured, the pieces clicking into place, with a projected $200 million in follow-on work. "Cash that would solve their immediate problems," Zara confirmed. "But that's not all." She swiped to the next document. "They've already started the process of taking Sentinel public, as a subsidiary of Blackwell Group." I stared at the preliminary SEC filing, dated 2 weeks ago. They filed this before even approaching me? The audacity was breathtaking. "They're counting on you signing those papers on Sunday," Zara said. "The IPO announcement is scheduled for Monday morning." I leaned back in my chair, mind racing. So they need my company to bail out Richard's failures. That's why the sudden pressure. I looked up at Zara. "What happens if I don't sign?" She swiped to another document. Based on their current position, they'd need to sell at least 3 core assets to cover their obligations: their yacht, their stake in the downtown development project, and possibly their family home. The historic Blackwell estate, the crown jewel of their holdings, the symbol of their dynasty. No wonder they were desperate. "Have you confirmed all this?" Zara nodded. "Triple-checked through different sources. They've kept it quiet, but the information is there if you know where to look." I stood, walking to the window. The Blackwells had cultivated an image of untouchable wealth and success for generations. The reality of their financial struggles would be devastating to their reputation and to Richard's pride. "Do we have any indication that Richard is being coerced?" I asked, still holding out a thin hope that my husband wasn't willingly participating in this scheme. Zara's silence answered before her words did. "We found this in their private communications." The email on the tablet was from Richard to his father, dated 1 month ago. "B still has no idea about her company's true value with the pending contract. If we move quickly, we can acquire Sentinel for a fraction of what it will be worth post-announcement. She trusts me completely." Something cold and hard settled in my chest. "He's been planning this for at least a month." "I'm sorry, Brynlee," Zara said quietly. I took a deep breath, then another. Don't be. Better to know now than after I've signed away my company. I turned back to face her. How did you get access to their private communications? A hint of a smile crossed Zara's face. Let's just say that Blackwell Group's cybersecurity is nowhere near as robust as what we provide to our clients. So we have proof they're deliberately undervaluing my company in this acquisition. Proof they knew about the government contract before it was public, Zara confirmed. Proof they've been planning this takeover for months, and proof Richard has been an active participant. I walked back to my desk, picking up the leather folio Thomas had left. Then we need to prepare our countermove. Zara watched me carefully. The trust fund? Not yet, I said, thinking through the steps. First, we need to secure Sentinel. Transfer all intellectual property to our shell company in the Caymans. Move our emergency operating funds offshore. Accelerate the security clearances. For our key team members. And if the Blackwells realize what we're doing, I smiled thinly. They won't. Because I'm going to do exactly what they expect. Act like the dutiful wife, considering their generous offer to save me from my own business incompetence. I picked up my phone and dialed Richard's number. He answered on the second ring, sounding surprised. Bryn, everything okay? It's early. Everything's fine, I said, injecting warmth into my voice. I've been reviewing your parents' proposal, and I have some questions. Can you do dinner tonight? Just the two of us? Of course, he replied, audibly relieved. I'll cancel my evening. Meeting? Perfect. I'll make reservations at Canlis. 7 o'clock? I'll be there. After hanging up, I turned to Zara. We have until Sunday to prepare. I need you to coordinate with legal to create a bulletproof defense against any hostile takeover attempt, and Maya will help us identify the mole in our organization. Zara nodded. And what will you be doing? I picked up the tablet with Richard's damning email. Playing the role of a lifetime. The unsuspecting wife who has no idea her husband is plotting to steal her company right out from under her. As Zara left to set our plan in motion, I stood at the window, watching Seattle fully awaken below. For 4 years, I'd played the part of Richard Blackwell's wife, supportive, deferential to his family, grateful to be accepted into their rarefied world. I'd hidden my grandfather's trust fund, telling myself it was about preserving my independence, about proving I could succeed on my own. But now I understood it had been intuition all along. Some part of me had always known this day might come, had known that in the world of the Blackwells, nothing, not love, not marriage, not even family, trumped the pursuit of power and wealth. I opened my secure phone and called the one number I'd promised myself I would never use unless absolutely necessary. Harrison, Pierce, and Associates, answered a crisp voice. This is Brynlee Keller, I said. I need to speak with Mr. Pierce. Authorization code, Granite 7 Echo 9. A pause, then. One moment, Ms. Keller. As I waited for my grandfather's lawyer to come on the line, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The Blackwells thought they were dealing with Brynlee Keller, self-made entrepreneur who'd married into their world. They were about to meet Brynlee Keller, sole heir to the Keller fortune, a fortune that made the Blackwell wealth look like pocket change. Ms. Keller, came the familiar voice of Theodore Pierce, who'd managed my grandfather's affairs for 40 years. It's been some time. Too long, I agreed, but I'm afraid I need to access the contingency fund. The situation my grandfather always warned me about. It's happening. I see, he said gravely. The full amount? I looked at the family photo on my desk, Richard and his parents flanking me at our wedding, their smiles calculating, proprietary. Every penny. And Theodore, I need it ready by Sunday. The game was on, and the Blackwells had no idea they were already 3 moves behind. Canlis Restaurant overlooked Lake Union, its mid-century architecture and panoramic windows making it the perfect setting for Seattle's power brokers. I arrived 15 minutes early, giving the maitre d' a warm smile as he led me to the private alcove I'd requested, intimate enough for a romantic dinner, secluded enough to record every word. "Mrs. Blackwell, always a pleasure," he said, pulling out my chair. "Mr. Blackwell hasn't arrived yet. Would you care for a drink while waiting?" "Macallan 25, neat," I replied, ordering Richard's favorite scotch. "And please, call me Ms. Keller." The subtle correction earned me a curious glance, but he nodded respectfully. "Of course, Ms. Keller." I used the moments alone to activate the recording app on my phone, developed by Sentinel's own engineers, disguised as a meditation timer, and capable of capturing crystal-clear audio even in a crowded restaurant. Then I arranged my features into the expression Richard would expect, slightly anxious, deferential, ready to be guided by his superior business acumen. He arrived 7 minutes late, striding through the restaurant with the confidence of a man, born to privilege. Several diners nodded in recognition. The Blackwell name opened doors throughout Seattle. "Sorry I'm late," he said, bending to kiss my cheek. "Dad called just as I was leaving the office." I smiled, sliding his scotch toward him. "I ordered for you." His eyes softened momentarily, a glimpse of the Richard I'd fallen for years ago. "You always remember the little things." "Speaking of your dad," I said, after he'd taken his first appreciative sip, "I've been reviewing those documents they brought over." Interest sharpened his gaze, though he tried to appear casual. "And?" "I have questions," I demurred, playing the part of a woman seeking guidance. "The structure seems complex, and honestly, some of the valuation metrics for Sentinel are confusing." Richard leaned forward, his voice taking on the patient tone he used when explaining complicated business matters to me. "That's understandable. Corporate restructuring can seem intimidating, especially when you've been running a smaller operation." "Smaller operation?" I bit the inside of my cheek, nodding encouragingly. "The thing is, Bryn," he continued, reaching for my hand across the table, "Sentinel has great potential, but it needs the infrastructure and connections that Blackwell Group can provide." "I understand that," I said, my voice carefully measured. "But the offer values Sentinel at $30 million. Our last round of private investment valued us at $45 million, and that was before the government contract rumors." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Those private valuations are often inflated, honey. Dad's team did a thorough analysis, based on current market conditions, risk factors, and conservative growth projections. The documents also mention replacing my executive team." I pressed gently. "Zara has been with me from the beginning. She knows our finances better than anyone." Richard's thumb stroked the back of my hand, a gesture once comforting, now calculating. "Fresh perspective can be valuable. Dad's CFO has decades of experience with companies much larger than Sentinel." The waiter arrived to take our orders. I requested the salmon, Richard the Wagyu steak. Once we were alone again, I steered the conversation to seemingly innocent questions about the restructuring timeline, reporting relationships, and transition plan. With each answer, Richard revealed more of their intentions: immediate control, my gradual sidelining, and eventual replacement. "Your mother mentioned tax benefits," I said, sipping my wine. "But I don't see those detailed in the documents." Richard waved dismissively. "That'll come later, in the post-acquisition planning. The important thing is protecting what you've built by bringing it under the Blackwell umbrella." "Protection is important," I agreed. "Which reminds me, does your father still have that security consulting firm on retainer? The one that helped after the break-in at your parents' summer house? Pinnacle Security?" "Yes. Why?" I lowered my voice conspiratorially. "We've had some suspicious activity around our servers. Probably nothing, but I'd feel better having experts. Check it out." Richard's expression flickered, concern, then calculation. "I'll give you their contact info, but honestly, Once we complete this deal, you'll have access to much better security resources through Blackwell Group. Our meals arrived, and I guided the conversation to lighter topics: an upcoming charity gala, renovation plans for his parents' yacht, the vacation to the Maldives we'd been discussing. All the while, I watched him, the man I'd married, now, revealed as a stranger executing a hostile takeover of my life's work. Over dessert, I circled back to the acquisition. So, if I understand correctly, after signing, I would report to your father as chairman, while maintaining my title as CEO of Sentinel? Richard nodded, clearly relieved by my apparent acceptance. Exactly. Nothing really changes day to day. You just gain the advantages of our larger infrastructure. And the board would consist of me, Dad, our family attorney, and you, of course. 4 seats, with me holding just 1 vote. It's really the ideal arrangement, Bryn. You keep running. The company you built, with the security of Blackwell Group behind you. I forced an appreciative smile. It does sound ideal when you explain it that way. His phone buzzed. Glancing down, he frowned slightly. Dad's calling again. Mind if I take this? Of course not. As he stepped away to answer, I quickly texted, Maya, all set for tomorrow morning? Her reply came seconds later. Everything arranged per your instructions. 8 a.m. Richard returned, looking slightly tense. Sorry about that. Just some issues with the Robertson acquisition. I raised an eyebrow. Problems? Nothing serious, he said quickly. Just last-minute negotiations. You know how these things go. But I did know. And the Robertson deal was another piece of the puzzle. A failing tech company the Blackwells were overpaying for, desperate to shore up their portfolio before their cash crisis became public knowledge. Well, I said, placing my napkin beside my plate. This has been illuminating. Thank you for explaining everything so clearly. Relief softened his features. Then you'll sign on Sunday? I reached across the table, taking his hand in both of mine. I just need to review everything once more with my team. I want to be fully informed when I meet with your parents. Disappointment flashed across his face, quickly masked. Of course. Due diligence is important, even in family matters. Even in family matters. As if the Blackwell definition of family didn't revolve entirely around consolidating wealth and power. Later, as we walked to the valet stand, Richard pulled me close against the evening chill. I'm proud of you, you know, he murmured. Most people in your position would feel threatened by all this. But you're seeing the bigger picture. I leaned into him, playing my part one last time. I trust you, Richard. I always have. His arm tightened around me, possessive and satisfied. He thought he'd won. The next morning, I arrived at Sentinel headquarters precisely at 7:30 a.m. Maya was waiting in the lobby with 2 security guards. Everything's ready, she reported as we walked to the elevator. The entire executive team is assembled in the conference room. Mr. Chandler arrived 10 minutes ago. Daniel Chandler was Sentinel's head of cybersecurity, a former NSA specialist who joined us after the government tried to limit his research into advanced encryption protocols. Brilliant, eccentric, and fanatically loyal to the company that had given him free rein to pursue his innovations. Has he found anything? I asked as the elevator doors closed. Maya handed me a tablet. Multiple unauthorized access points in our system. Someone's been monitoring internal communications, financial reports, and your calendar specifically. Richard? Not directly. The access originated from a device registered to Pinnacle Security, the same firm Richard had mentioned at dinner, the one working for the Blackwells. What about our mole? Maya's expression hardened. Jason Rogers, VP of Business Development. We found texts between him and Richard discussing Sentinel's financial status and the DoD contract details. Jason had been one of Richard's Harvard classmates, someone I'd hired at my husband's recommendation 2 years ago. I'd trusted Richard's judgment, ignoring the warning signs. Jason's mediocre performance, his constant alignment with Richard's perspectives during strategy meetings, his unnecessary interest in our financial projections. "He's waiting in your office," Maya added. "Doesn't know why he's been called in early." The elevator opened directly into Sentinel's executive floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see my leadership team assembled. Zara, Raj, our COO Ethan, and 5 other department heads. All people I'd personally recruited who'd believed in my vision when Sentinel was nothing but ambitious plans and prototype software. "Give me 5 minutes with Jason," I told Maya. "Then bring everyone else in." Jason Rogers was standing at my office window when I entered, his tailored suit and carefully styled hair projecting the polished image he prioritized over actual results. He turned with a practiced smile that faltered when he saw my expression. "Brynlee, good morning. Is everything all right?" I closed the door behind me. "Tell me, Jason, how long have you been feeding information to Richard?" His smile disappeared entirely. "I don't know what you're talking." "Don't," I cut him off. "We have your texts. We have the access logs. We have everything." His face paled, then flushed with anger. "Richard was right. You're way out of your depth here." I moved to my desk, angling my computer screen toward him. On it played a compilation of his activities, forwarding confidential emails to an external account, photographing financial documents with his phone, having hushed phone conversations, in the empty office after hours. "Corporate espionage violates at least 6 clauses in your employment contract," I said calmly, "not to mention potential criminal charges, given our government contracts." Sweat beaded on his forehead. Richard assured me this was all above board, a friendly merger between family interests. "There's nothing friendly about corporate theft. Jason," I pushed a document across the desk. "Your resignation, effective immediately. Sign it, surrender your company devices, and you might avoid criminal charges." He stared at the paper, then at me. "You know this won't stop anything, right? The Blackwells always get what they want. They've been planning this for months." "I'm counting on it," I replied. "Now sign." 5 minutes later, Maya escorted a shaken Jason to the elevator, his security access already revoked, his company phone and laptop confiscated. In the conference room, my executive team waited silently. Sensing the gravity of the situation, I'd called them in early on a Friday without explanation, interrupting vacation plans and family breakfasts. "Thank you all for coming," I began, standing at the head of the table. "What I'm about to share must not leave this room." For the next 20 minutes, I outlined everything: the Blackwell's acquisition attempt, their financial troubles, Richard's betrayal, and the imminent threat to Sentinel's independence. "They want our government contracts and our proprietary technology," I concluded. "And they've already started the process of taking us public under their control, without our knowledge or consent." Stunned silence followed, broken finally by Ethan, our COO. "But that's corporate fraud." "It would be," Zara agreed, "if Brynlee signed their documents on Sunday." "Which she won't." "What's our counter strategy?" asked Raj, ever the tactician. I nodded to Daniel Chandler, who activated the room's electronic security measures: signal jammers, white noise generators, and monitoring devices that would detect any attempt at surveillance. "Operation Firewall," I announced, bringing up our contingency plans on the room's screens. "We have approximately 48 hours to secure Sentinel against hostile takeover." What followed was an intense strategy session. Each department head received specific assignments: transferring intellectual property to our secure holding company, moving critical assets offshore, documenting the Blackwell's unauthorized system access, and preparing legal countermeasures. "What? About the DoD contract?" asked Ethan. "If the Blackwells know it's coming?" "They know rumors," I clarified. "What they don't know is that the contract was officially approved yesterday afternoon." I glanced at my watch. "The public announcement is scheduled for Monday morning, conveniently the same day they planned. to announce their acquisition of Sentinel. Raj leaned forward. So their plan was to buy you out before the contract value became public knowledge, then reap the benefits. Exactly. I brought up financial projections on the main screen. The contract doesn't just provide $50 million in immediate revenue. It positions us for preferred vendor status on a $2 billion defense initiative over the next decade. Low whistles and murmurs filled the room as the team absorbed the implications. No wonder they're desperate, Zara commented. This contract alone would solve their liquidity crisis. But now we know their game, I said, and we're going to be ready when they make their final move on Sunday. For the rest of the morning, the team worked feverishly, executing each element of Operation Firewall with precision and secrecy. By noon, Sentinel's most valuable assets were secure. Access protocols had been updated to lock out any Blackwell-affiliated entities, and legal documents were prepared for every possible scenario. As the others left for a quick lunch, Chandler lingered behind, his lanky frame perched awkwardly on the edge of the conference table. "There's something else you should know," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "When we were tracing the Pinnacle security intrusions, we found evidence they accessed your personal devices too, not just your work systems." A chill ran through me. "My home office? My phone?" He nodded grimly. "Both compromised. They've had eyes and ears in your home for at least 3 months. The implications hit me like a physical blow. 3 months of private conversations, intimate moments with Richard, late-night work sessions in my home office, all monitored by the Blackwells. Can you tell what they accessed?" Daniel handed me a flash drive. "Everything on this. But the short version? They know about your meetings with Zara. They know about your concerns regarding the company's cash flow during contract transitions. What about—" I hesitated. "What about my grandfather's trust fund? My personal finances?" He shook his head. "No evidence they accessed those. Your personal banking was done on your secure laptop, which shows no signs of compromise." At least, there was that small mercy. The Blackwells still had no idea about my hidden resources, the ace I'd kept up my sleeve all these years. "I want our complete findings on the surveillance documented and time-stamped," I instructed. "And I need a clean phone immediately." "Already done." Daniel placed a brand new device on the table. "Secure line, encrypted messaging, untraceable to Sentinel or your personal accounts." I picked it up. "Who has this number?" "Just me, Zara, and Maya." "Perfect." I pocketed the phone. "And Daniel? Thank you. For everything." He ducked his head, uncomfortable with gratitude as always. Just protecting what we built. What we built. That simple phrase crystallized everything I was fighting. For, not just my company, but the collective vision of everyone who'd believed in Sentinel from the beginning. After Daniel left, I stood alone in the conference room, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere across that cityscape, Richard and his parents were finalizing their plans, confident in their imminent victory. They thought Sunday dinner would be a simple formality, the culmination of months of manipulation and deceit. They had no idea what was coming. My secure phone buzzed, with a text from Theodore Pierce. "Arrangements complete. Meeting confirmed for 4 p.m. today at the specified location." I checked the time. Just enough to finalize today's security protocols before meeting my grandfather's lawyer to activate the trust fund, the financial weapon the Blackwells never saw. Coming. The nondescript office building in downtown Bellevue housed multiple law firms, financial advisors, and corporate services. Nothing about its understated exterior suggested it was the nerve center for one of the largest private fortunes in the Pacific Northwest. Theodore Pierce's assistant led me through a labyrinth of corridors to a wood-paneled conference room where the elderly lawyer waited, surrounded by stacks of documents and secure tablets. "Brynlee," he greeted me, rising with the careful movements of his 80-plus years. You look remarkably like your grandmother. She had that same determination in her eyes. Thank you for arranging this on such short notice, I said, taking the seat he indicated. Your grandfather's instructions were explicit, he replied, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The contingency protocols were to be activated immediately upon your request, without question or delay. My grandfather, Edmund Keller, had built his fortune in shipping and early tech investments, turning a modest inheritance into billions through shrewd business acumen and an almost paranoid level of privacy. When he died 12 years ago, I was 16, too young to directly inherit his empire. Instead, he'd created an elaborate trust structure that would preserve his wealth until I turned 25, while keeping the full extent of my inheritance hidden from public records. I'd accessed only a fraction of those resources since gaining control, enough to live comfortably while building Sentinel through my own efforts. The trust's full power had remained dormant, like a sleeping giant waiting for the right moment to awaken. We'll need to move quickly, Theodore said, sliding a secure tablet toward me. These are the current holdings and liquid assets available for immediate deployment. The figures on the screen made even my financially accustomed eyes widen. Edmund Keller's careful stewardship and Theodore's expert management had grown the trust far beyond what I'd realized. And this can all be activated by Sunday? Theodore nodded. The offshore accounts are already accessible. The domestic assets require your biometric confirmation and signature on these documents. He pushed a stack of papers forward. Once executed, you'll have full control of the entire portfolio. I scanned the first page, which listed the Keller Trust's current net worth, $4.7 billion, nearly 5 times the total value of Blackwell Group. There's something else your grandfather instructed me to give you when you activated the contingency. Protocol, Theodore said, unlocking a small safe beneath the conference table. He removed a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. His personal letter, to be opened only in circumstances such as these. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with more than just paper. I broke the seal and unfolded 3 pages of my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. My dearest Brynlee, if you're reading this, Theodore has determined that the circumstances warrant activating the full contingency protocol. I established these measures not from simple paranoia, but from hard-earned wisdom about the nature of wealth and power. In my lifetime, I watched good people destroyed by those who viewed relationships as merely transactional, marriages as mergers, friendships as strategic alliances, family ties as corporate assets. I built walls around our family fortune not from greed, but from the desire to give you something precious. Choice. The choice to reveal or conceal your inheritance. The choice to trust or verify. The choice to use these resources offensively or defensively. Now that choice is entirely yours. The funds, properties, and investments detailed in these documents represent not just financial power, but the power to shape your own destiny without constraint. Use it wisely, use it justly, but above all, use it on your own terms, not in reaction to others' machinations. With eternal faith in your judgment, your loving grandfather, Edmund. I folded the letter carefully, blinking back unexpected tears. My grandfather had anticipated this moment, had prepared me for it. Long. Before I could have imagined needing such protection. Theodore, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I'll need complete documentation of the Blackwell Group's financial position, major holdings, and outstanding debts. He nodded, unsurprised. Already compiled. He slid another tablet toward me. They're significantly overextended, particularly in their real estate and technology divisions. I skimmed the analysis, focusing on their vulnerabilities. And their major creditors? First National Business Bank holds the majority of their corporate debt. Sterling Investment Group and Pacific Lending hold the rest. Perfect. I looked up from the tablet. I want to arrange meetings with all 3 institutions before Sunday. Discreetly. Theodore's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. consider it done. For the next 2 hours, we reviewed documents, transferred access codes, and finalized the activation of accounts that had lain dormant for years. By the time we finished, I had full control of resources that would forever alter the balance of power between the Kellers and the Blackwells. As Theodore walked me out, he paused at the elevator. "Your grandfather would be proud of how you've handled yourself," he said quietly, "building your own success before accessing his legacy." "I'm not sure he'd approve of what I'm about to do," I admitted. The old lawyer smiled thinly. "Edmund Keller believed in proportional response to aggression. From what you've told me, the Blackwells are attempting to seize everything you've built through deception and manipulation." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. "I'd say your grandfather would consider that sufficient provocation for whatever you have planned." I stepped into the elevator, the weight of my decisions settling around me like a cloak. Sunday dinner at the Blackwells is going to be quite memorable. Theodore's knowing smile was the last thing I saw as the doors closed. "I imagine it will be, Ms. Keller. I imagine it will be." As I exited the building, my secure phone buzzed with a message from Zara. "Operation Firewall complete. All assets secured. Ready for Sunday." I texted back, "Trust activated. Proceeding with Phase 2. Then I dialed Richard's number, forcing warmth into my voice when he answered. "Hi, honey. Just checking what time we should arrive for dinner on Sunday." 7 o'clock, he replied, sounding pleased. "Mom's making her famous prime rib. Dad's excited to finalize everything." "So am I assured him, the lie smooth on my tongue. "It's time to bring the family businesses together, don't you think?" His satisfied chuckle echoed in my ear. "Absolutely. See you at home later?" "Actually, I need to work late tonight. Don't wait up." After hanging up, I stared at the Seattle skyline, the Blackwell Tower prominent among the skyscrapers. By Sunday night, the city's balance of power would be irrevocably shifted. The Blackwells thought they were acquiring a company. They didn't realize they were declaring war on a dynasty. A Tuesday morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that matched my mood as I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Richard. He'd returned home late last night, smelling of expensive cigars and his father's preferred bourbon. The Blackwell men had clearly been celebrating their imminent victory. I showered quickly and dressed in running clothes, maintaining the Saturday routine Richard had come to expect. Our Bluetooth speaker played soft jazz in the kitchen as I prepared coffee, positioning myself perfectly for the hidden camera I now knew was watching from the bookshelf. Right on cue, Richard emerged from the bedroom at 7:30, sleep rumpled and smiling. "Morning," he murmured, accepting the coffee mug I offered. "Early start?" "Just a quick run before the rain gets worse," I replied, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "Then I thought I'd review those documents one more time before tomorrow." His arm slid around my waist, possessive. "That sounds perfect. I'm meeting Dad for golf at 11, but I'll be home for dinner." I nodded, wondering if their golf would actually involve finalizing details for tomorrow's ambush. "I made reservations at Altura, 8 o'clock. Our last dinner before the big merger." He grinned, raising his mug in a toast. "To new beginnings." I clinked my mug against his, forcing a smile. "To new beginnings." As soon as Richard left for his shower, I slipped a small device from my pocket and placed it beneath the kitchen island, a signal disruptor that would create just enough interference to make any surveillance footage from our apartment useless without obviously appearing to be sabotage. Just a technical glitch that would frustrate the Blackwell's surveillance team while I executed the next phase of my plan. 20 minutes later, I was jogging along the waterfront path, but instead of completing my usual 5-mile loop, I veered into downtown, where Zara waited in a nondescript sedan. "Any problems?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "None. Richard suspects nothing." I pulled a tablet from Zara's bag, reviewing the morning's updates. Status report? Phase 2. Initiation complete. First National Business Bank was remarkably receptive to our proposal. I skimmed the preliminary agreement on the screen. The bank had agreed to sell the Blackwell Group's outstanding loans, totaling nearly $400 million, to a shell company, controlled by my grandfather's trust. The transaction would be completed by 9 a.m. Monday morning, giving me leverage over their entire corporate structure. Sterling Investment and Pacific Lending? Similar agreements, slightly different terms. Zara navigated through downtown traffic, heading toward our first meeting of the day. By Monday morning, you'll effectively own all the Blackwell Group's debt. I nodded, satisfied, and they'll have no idea until it's too late. The legal team has prepared all the documentation for tomorrow night. Everything's ready for your signature once you give the final go-ahead. We pulled into the underground parking garage of a luxury hotel in downtown Seattle, where a private suite had been reserved under a pseudonym. Theodore Pierce had arranged a series of meetings with key financial players, meetings that would remain invisible to the Blackwell's extensive network of business connections. One more thing, Zara said, as we rode the elevator to the penthouse floor. Maya called. Richard tried accessing your private server this morning after you left. My jaw tightened. Successfully? No. She implemented the honeypot we discussed. He thinks he found financial projections showing Sentinel is in worse shape than you've admitted. Perfect, I murmured as the elevator doors opened. Let them think they have the upper hand. The suite had been converted into a temporary command center, with secure communications equipment, multiple workstations, and a large conference table, where Theodore Pierce and 3 banking executives awaited us. Ms. Keller, Theodore greeted me, rising from his seat. Allow me to introduce James Harrington, CEO of Pacific Northwest Federal Bank. I shook hands with the silver-haired banker, whose institution had never previously done business with either the Kellers or the Blackwells. That independence made them perfect for what I had planned. Your grandfather was a good friend, Harrington said, though few people knew about their connection. My grandfather valued privacy above almost everything, I replied, taking a seat at the head of the table. A trait I've come to appreciate more recently. For the next hour, we hammered out the details of a financing arrangement that would be presented to the Blackwells only after they'd revealed their true intentions. By the time we finished, Pacific Northwest Federal had committed to backing my contingency plan with $1 billion in immediately available credit, a financial weapon that would make tomorrow night's confrontation decisively one-sided. As the bankers departed, Theodore lingered behind. The private investigators have completed their report on the Blackwells' recent activities, he said, sliding a thick folder across the table. I flipped through detailed surveillance logs, financial transactions, and meeting summaries. The Blackwells had been systematically preparing for this takeover for nearly 6 months, longer than I'd suspected. They'd courted Sentinel's investors, researched our clients, and mapped out a complete restructuring plan that would gradually eliminate everyone loyal to me. Most damning was an email chain between Richard and his father, discussing the unfortunate necessity of pushing me out entirely within 6 months of the acquisition, couched in language about fresh leadership and strategic realignment. They never intended for me to remain as CEO, I said, the final illusion about my marriage shattering completely. No, Theodore agreed grimly. According to their timeline, you would be transitioned to an advisory role by Christmas and removed entirely by next spring. I closed the folder, a cold clarity settling over me. Any updates on their financial position? Deteriorating faster than they're admitting publicly. The Robertson acquisition is draining their remaining liquidity. Without immediate cash infusion, they'll miss loan payments within 60 days. Which is why they're so desperate to acquire Sentinel before the DoD contract announcement, Zara added. And why they'll sign anything I put in front of them tomorrow night if it might save them from financial ruin, I concluded. The rest of the day unfolded according to our carefully choreographed plan. While I maintained the appearance of a wife considering her in-laws' generous offer, my team executed a series of precise financial and legal maneuvers designed to position us perfectly for Sunday night's confrontation. By late afternoon, I returned to our penthouse to prepare for dinner with Richard. The signal disruptor had done its job. Any surveillance footage from our home would show only static and fragmented images, creating the impression of technical difficulties rather than deliberate interference. I chose my outfit carefully, a conservative navy dress that projected exactly the image Richard and his family expected: tasteful, attractive, and ultimately unthreatening. The kind of wife who would eventually yield to her husband's superior business judgment. Richard arrived home at 7:30, bringing a bouquet of expensive roses, a calculated gesture of affection that once would have touched me but now felt like a down payment on my betrayal. "You look beautiful," he said, eyes appreciative as I emerged from our bedroom. "Nervous about tomorrow?" I smiled, adjusting my simple pearl earrings, another jewelry gift from Richard that projected exactly the image he wanted for his wife. "A little. It's a big step." He kissed my forehead, patronizing. "It's the right step, Bryn. Dad's already talking about how you can help with the Robertson integration after the merger is complete." The Robertson integration, the failing tech company they were overpaying for, desperately attempting to project strength despite their crumbling finances. I made an appropriate noise of interest as we headed to the elevator. Altura Restaurant offered intimate fine dining in a space that felt like a private dinner party. The chef greeted Richard by name. The Blackwells were investors in several high-end Seattle restaurants and led us to a secluded corner table. "Wine?" Richard suggested, already signaling the sommelier. "Actually," I said, laying my hand over his, "could we have champagne tonight? It feels like a celebration." Pleased surprise lit his face. "Absolutely." He ordered a bottle of Krug, then leaned closer across the table. "Does this mean what I think it means?" I lowered my eyes, the picture of a wife who had seen reason. "I spoke with Zara this afternoon. She helped me understand the benefits of the merger more clearly." His smile widened, triumphant, but trying to appear merely supportive. "That's wonderful, Bryn. Mom and Dad will be thrilled." "I do have a few small requests for tomorrow," I added, as the champagne arrived. "Nothing major, just some details about my role going forward." Richard nodded magnanimously as the sommelier poured. "Of course. We want you to be comfortable with everything." The champagne sparkled in our glasses, catching the candlelight. Richard raised his in a toast. "To the Blackwell family, all of us together." I clinked my glass against his, smiling. "To getting exactly what we deserve." Throughout dinner, I maintained the delicate balance of appearing increasingly receptive to the merger, while asking just enough questions to seem thoughtful rather than suspicious. Richard grew more expansive with each course, detailing how Sentinel would be integrated into the Blackwell Group's portfolio, occasionally letting slip details that confirmed everything my investigation had uncovered. "Dad's already discussing the IPO with the investment banks," he said over dessert, too confident now to maintain secrecy. "Once we announce the Pentagon contract, Sentinel's valuation will skyrocket." I widened my eyes in calculated surprise. "The banks already know about the merger?" He waved dismissively. "Preliminary discussions only. Nothing binding until you sign tomorrow." But I knew better. The SEC filings were already prepared. The announcements were drafted. The press releases scheduled. The Blackwells had proceeded, as if my agreement was a mere formality, a signature to be collected from an obedient wife rather than a CEO protecting her company. As Richard paid the bill, I excused myself to the restroom, where I sent a secure text to Zara. "Confirmed. Proceeding with final preparations. All assets in position for tomorrow." Her reply came seconds later. "War room ready. Team on standby." When I emerged, Richard was waiting by the door, looking pleased with himself and the world. He draped his arm around my shoulders as we walked to the valet stand. I'm proud of you, Bryn. This is the right decision for everyone. I leaned into him, playing my role for one more night. I just want what's best for our future. His arm tightened possessively. That's exactly what this is. Back at our penthouse, Richard poured us nightcaps, expensive cognac he reserved for special occasions. We stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Seattle skyline where the Blackwell Tower stood illuminated among the skyscrapers. Someday, Richard mused, Sentinel's name will be on one of those buildings, part of the Blackwell legacy. I sipped my cognac, noting how he automatically assumed Sentinel would lose its independent identity, becoming merely another asset in the Blackwell portfolio. Legacy is important to your family, I said carefully. It's everything. His gaze remained fixed on the family tower. The Blackwells have helped build this city for 4 generations. Each of us is just a steward, protecting and growing what came before. In that moment, I almost pitied him. Richard had never built anything of his own. He'd been born into stewardship of someone else's creation, taught that maintenance of the family name was achievement enough. Let's get some sleep, I suggested, setting down my barely touched cognac. Tomorrow's a big day. Later, as Richard slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, mentally reviewing every detail of the plan. Tomorrow night would determine not just Sentinel's future, but the shape of my life moving forward. The evidence of Richard's betrayal had destroyed any lingering affection, leaving only a cold determination to protect what I'd built. My phone vibrated softly. A text from Theodore. Final confirmation received from all parties. Everything is in place. I deleted the message and closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to visualize the coming confrontation. The Blackwells thought they were closing a simple acquisition. They had no idea they were walking into a trap years in the making. Sunday morning brought unseasonable sunshine to Seattle, illuminating Mount Rainier in the distance as Richard and I shared a seemingly peaceful breakfast. The signal disruptor continued its work, ensuring that any surveillance of our home revealed nothing useful to the Blackwells. Nervous? Richard asked, watching me pick at my avocado toast. I managed a smile. A little. It's not every day you merge your company with your in-laws. He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. It's the right decision, Bryn. You'll see. I know, I replied softly. Everything will be clear by tonight. After breakfast, I excused myself for a yoga class, a regular Sunday activity that would raise no suspicions. Instead of the studio, however, I headed to a secure apartment Sentinel maintained for visiting executives, where Zara and Maya had established our command center. Status report, I requested, accepting the coffee Maya handed me. All legal documents prepared and verified, Zara replied, indicating a stack of folders on the conference table. The financial transfers are queued for execution pending your authorization codes. Theodore confirmed the bank representatives will be standing by tonight, Maya added. Ready to move the moment you give the signal. I reviewed the files one by one. Loan agreements, transfer authorizations, corporate resolutions, each document representing a different aspect of the vice we were preparing to close around the Blackwell Group. What about the technical team? I asked, thinking of the surveillance equipment in my home. Daniel reports the Blackwell's security system has been successfully penetrated, Maya said. We'll have access to every camera and microphone in their home during dinner. I nodded, a grim satisfaction settling over me. And the DoD announcement? Scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, Zara confirmed. The press release is finalized. Sentinel will be publicly named as the prime contractor on the $50 million initial phase, with options for expansion to $2 billion over 10 years. Perfect timing, I murmured. By 8 a.m. tomorrow, the business world would know Sentinel's true value. Hours after I had executed my counterstrike against the Blackwells. We spent the next several hours reviewing contingencies, preparing for any possible response from the Blackwells once they realized their plan had failed. By mid-afternoon, I was satisfied we had covered every angle. "I should get back," I said, gathering my yoga bag to maintain my cover story. "Richard expects us to leave for his parents' house by 6. Zara walked me to the door. "Are you sure?" "About this. Once we execute, there's no going back, with the company or your marriage." I paused, hand on the doorknob. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to remember the early days with Richard. His charm, his apparent support, the family I thought I'd joined. Then I recalled his betrayal, the calculated deception, the cold discussion of pushing me out of my own company within months of the acquisition. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "The Blackwells declared war when they plotted to take everything I've built. I'm just ensuring they face the consequences of their choices." Back at the penthouse, I showered and began preparing for dinner with deliberate care. Every element of my appearance was calculated to project exactly the image the Blackwells expected to see: a successful but ultimately deferential wife, ready to yield to family pressure. I chose a conservative black dress, elegant but not flashy, with a single strand of pearls Richard had given me for our first anniversary. My makeup was subtle, my hair styled in soft waves that softened my features. The overall effect was polished but unthreatening, exactly what Margaret Blackwell would approve for a family dinner where important business would be conducted. Richard emerged from his closet in a tailored suit, adjusting his gold cufflinks, a Blackwell family heirloom his father had presented to him when he made partner in the family firm. "You look perfect," he said, eyes appraising my appearance with satisfaction. "I want to make a good impression." "Tonight," I replied, slipping into the role of the eager-to-please daughter-in-law one final time. His smile was indulgent. "They already adore you. And after tonight, you'll officially be part of the family business too." If only he knew how true that statement would prove, though not in the way he imagined. The drive to the Blackwell estate took 40 minutes, leaving Seattle proper for the exclusive enclave of Medina where tech billionaires and old money families maintained lakefront mansions behind discreet security systems. The Blackwell property had been in the family for 3 generations. 10 acres of manicured grounds surrounding a colonial-style mansion with views of Lake Washington. As we approached the wrought iron gates, I activated the secure phone in my purse with a single tap, sending a pre-programmed signal to our team. Operation in progress. Thomas and Margaret were waiting in the grand foyer as the housekeeper took our coats. Margaret embraced me with practiced warmth, her Chanel perfume enveloping me momentarily. "Brynlee, darling, you look lovely," she said, holding me at arm's length for inspection. Her approval of my appropriately subdued appearance was evident in her smile. Thomas stepped forward, kissing my cheek with paternal authority. "We've been looking forward to this dinner all week," he said, his deep voice carrying the absolute confidence of a man who had never faced serious opposition. "So have I," I replied truthfully. The Blackwell home was a showcase of old money aesthetics, ancestral portraits in heavy gilt frames, antique furniture arranged in perfect vignettes, and discreetly displayed artifacts from the family's historical connections to Seattle's development. Every element reinforced their sense of entitlement and permanence. We gathered in the formal living room where Thomas prepared drinks with ceremonial precision, scotch for himself and Richard, a white wine spritzer for Margaret, and a gin and tonic for me. The family ritual had played out countless times during my 4-year marriage, but tonight the familiar choreography felt ominous rather than comforting. "A toast," Thomas announced, raising his crystal tumbler, "to family and the future of the Blackwell Group." We clinked glasses, Richard's arm slipping around my waist possessively as he added, "and to Sentinel security becoming part of our legacy." I smiled, sipping my drink. To new beginnings for everyone. Margaret gestured toward the dining room, where the housekeeper had appeared to announce dinner. "Shall we? Cook has prepared Richard's favorite, prime rib with Yorkshire pudding. The jar. Blackwell dining room was designed to impress, with seating for 20 around a mahogany table that had reportedly hosted 2 presidents and countless business titans over the years. Tonight, the table was set for our intimate family dinner at one end, fine china and silver gleaming under the chandelier's soft light. As we took our seats, Thomas at the head of the table, Margaret to his right, Richard and I across from each. I noted the leather portfolio placed discreetly beside Thomas's plate. The acquisition documents, positioned for signature after the main course but before dessert. The timing was so predictable, it might have been amusing under different circumstances. Throughout the first 2 courses, a delicate seafood bisque, followed by arugula salad with poached pears, conversation remained deliberately light. Margaret discussed the upcoming hospital charity gala she was chairing. Thomas mentioned a recent fishing trip to Alaska, and Richard shared an anecdote about a client that painted him as both clever and ethical. It was only as the prime rib was served that Thomas steered the conversation toward business, his tone carefully casual. Brynlee, Richard tells us you've had a chance to review our proposal. I hope you found everything in order. I dabbed my lips with the linen napkin, buying a moment to compose my response. The documents are very comprehensive. Your legal team was quite thorough. Margaret beamed, interpreting my neutral statement as approval. We want to ensure the transition is smooth for everyone, especially you, dear. This merger will relieve you of so many burdens. That's very thoughtful, I replied, cutting a small piece of perfectly medium-rare beef. I do have a few questions before we finalize everything. Thomas nodded indulgently. Of course, that's what family dinner is for, working through the details together. My main concern is ensuring Sentinel's core team remains intact through the transition, I said, voicing a concern that would seem natural and non-threatening. They've been instrumental to our success. Absolutely, Thomas agreed quickly, too quickly. We value the expertise your people bring to the table. Richard nodded, reinforcing his father's lie. The acquisition is about growth, not cuts. I took a sip of water, noting how easily the falsehoods flowed. The documents I'd reviewed detailed extensive restructuring that would eliminate most of my executive team within months. And my role going forward? I asked, my voice carefully modulated to sound appropriately deferential. The documents weren't entirely clear on reporting structures after the merger. Thomas and Richard exchanged a quick glance before Thomas responded with practiced smoothness. You'll maintain your CEO title at Sentinel, reporting directly to the new board. Myself, Richard, our general counsel, and you, of course. 4 board seats with me holding only 1 vote, exactly as Richard had explained at dinner. A structure designed to give me the illusion of control while ensuring I could be overruled on any significant decision. That sounds reasonable, I conceded, watching relief flicker across all 3 Blackwell faces. Though I was surprised to see the employment, contract limited to 2 years. Is that standard for your acquisitions? Another glance between father and son, this one tinged with tension. My question had touched on their unspoken plan to ease me out entirely within a year. Merely a formality, Thomas assured me. We fully expect a long and productive relationship. The initial term simply allows everyone to adjust to the new arrangement. I nodded thoughtfully. And the valuation, $30 million seems conservative given Sentinel's growth trajectory and client base. Richard jumped in, his tone patronizing. Market conditions have shifted significantly in recent months, Bryn. Dad's team conducted a thorough analysis based on comparable transactions. Of course, I murmured, letting the matter drop as the housekeeper cleared our plates. Thomas sensed victory approaching. He pulled the leather portfolio closer, preparing for the moment of signature. We've structured this deal to benefit everyone. Brynlee. Sentinel gains the stability and resources of the Blackwell Group, while maintaining its unique position in the security market. Margaret reached across the table to pat my hand. And you'll finally have time to breathe, dear. Maybe even start thinking about a family. You and Richard have been so focused on careers. I smiled, allowing her to interpret my expression as agreement rather than the cold determination it actually reflected. Family is important, I agreed. Which brings me to a related question. Of course, Thomas said, beginning to open the portfolio. I'm curious why you decided to file preliminary IPO documents for Sentinel as a Blackwell subsidiary 2 weeks ago, before approaching me about this acquisition. The silence that descended on the dining room was absolute. Thomas froze, his hand still on the portfolio. Margaret's smile became fixed, a porcelain mask that revealed nothing. Richard's face drained of color. I'm also interested, I continued into the silence, my voice still pleasant, but now carrying an edge of steel. In why you engaged Pinnacle Security to conduct surveillance on my home and office for the past 3 months. Thomas recovered first, his businessman's instincts kicking in. I'm not sure where you're getting this information, Brynlee, but there's clearly been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I replied calmly, reaching into my purse and removing a thin file. I have copies of the SEC filings, the surveillance contracts, and the internal memos discussing how to phase me out of my own company within 6 months of acquisition. Richard leaned forward, his expression hardening. Where did you get those documents? The same place I found these, I continued, sliding printed copies of text messages across the table. Conversations between Richard and Jason Rogers detailing their corporate espionage. And these. Email exchanges between Richard and his father discussing the unfortunate necessity of pushing me out post-acquisition. Margaret's face had turned to stone, her social mask dropping to reveal the calculating businesswoman beneath. Thomas, what is this? A negotiating tactic, Thomas replied smoothly, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. Brynlee is simply trying to improve the terms of the deal. I smiled, placing my napkin beside my plate with deliberate calm. No, Thomas, I'm not negotiating. I'm declining your offer entirely. Richard's expression darkened. Don't be ridiculous, Bryn. You need this deal more than we do. Sentinel's cash flow problems are temporary and manageable, I finished for him. Unlike the Blackwell Group's liquidity crisis, which will become critical within 60 days unless you secure immediate financing. Thomas went very still. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I folded, my hands on the table. The Robertson acquisition has drained your remaining cash reserves. Your loans are coming due, and without an immediate infusion of capital, you'll default on your obligations to First National Business Bank. The blood drained from Thomas's face. How could you possibly know the details of your financial situation? I finished for him. I make it my business to understand potential business partners or threats completely before making decisions. Richard slammed his palm on the table, making the crystal water glasses jump. This is absurd. You're turning down the opportunity of a lifetime because of what? Wounded pride? Some paranoid fantasy that we're out to get you? Not a fantasy, I replied evenly, sliding another document across the table. The complete timeline of their takeover plan, including Richard's role in every phase. A documented conspiracy to seize control of my company for a fraction of its value, then push me out entirely. Thomas Blackwell had built his reputation on remaining unflappable in business crises. That composure cracked visibly now as he scanned the documents before him, recognizing internal communications never meant to be seen by outsiders. Where did you get these? He demanded, his voice dangerous. You should invest in better cybersecurity, I suggested mildly. Sentinel specializes in protecting sensitive corporate information. Perhaps you should have become a client rather than an adversary. Margaret's eyes had narrowed to calculating slits. What do you want, Brynlee? A better price? Different terms? I stood slowly, gathering my purse. I want nothing from you. I came tonight to inform you that I'm aware of your scheme and to formally decline your acquisition offer. Richard rose as well, his face flushed with anger. You're making a serious mistake. Without the Blackwell name behind you, Sentinel will continue to thrive. I cut him off. Beginning with the public announcement tomorrow morning of our $50 million Department of Defense contract. Thomas blanched. The contract is confirmed? Signed last week. The press release goes out at 8 a.m. I smiled coldly. The same time you plan to announce your acquisition of my company. The three Blackwells exchanged glances, silently recalculating their position. I could almost see the mental arithmetic. The contract would solve Sentinel's temporary cash flow issues and dramatically increase its valuation, taking it permanently beyond their reach. This is unfortunate, Thomas said finally, closing the portfolio with a snap. But perhaps a cooling-off period would benefit everyone. We can revisit this conversation in a few weeks. No, I interrupted quietly. We won't be revisiting anything. This conversation and my relationship with the Blackwell family ends tonight. Richard stared at me, disbelief giving way to calculating assessment. You're bluffing. You wouldn't walk away from 4 years of marriage over a business disagreement. I met his gaze steadily. This isn't a business disagreement, Richard. It's a betrayal. You conspired with your parents to steal my company. You spied on me. You planted a mole in my organization. You planned to push me out of my own creation. Within months. Now, Brynlee, Thomas began, adopting his most reasonable tone. Business and family are complex. Save it. I cut him off, turning toward the door. I've heard enough Blackwell justifications for one lifetime. Richard moved to block my path, his expression hardening. You're not walking out of here like this. Not after everything we've invested in you. I arched an eyebrow. Invested in me? Is that how you view our marriage? An investment with expected returns? Don't be naive, he snapped. Every relationship is a transaction. You married me for the Blackwell name and connections. I laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to catch him off guard. I never needed the Blackwell name or connections, Richard. My company succeeded despite your family, not because of it. Then why marry me at all? He demanded. Because I thought I loved you, I answered simply. Clearly I was wrong. Margaret rose from her seat, aristocratic dignity gathering around her like a cloak. If you walk out that door, you'll regret it. The Blackwells have influence throughout Seattle's business community. Threats now? I smiled thinly. How predictable. Thomas joined his wife, his businessman's mask firmly back in place. Not threats. Reality. You've made an enemy you can't afford, Brynlee. I paused at the dining room threshold, turning back to face the three of them, united in their sense of entitlement and outrage. Actually, you're the ones who can't afford this enemy. I reached into my purse and removed a small device, pressing a button that would signal my team waiting outside. And you have no idea what you've awakened. As I walked through the grand foyer toward the front door, I heard Richard's angry footsteps behind me. This isn't over, Bryn. You walk out now, you lose everything. I turned, one hand on the doorknob. No, Richard. You're the one who just lost everything. You just don't know it yet. I stepped outside into the evening air, where a black SUV waited at the bottom of the steps. As I descended, the Blackwells gathered in the doorway behind me, their expressions, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and the first flickering awareness that they might have miscalculated severely. What they couldn't know was that the true reckoning was yet to come. Phase 3 would begin at midnight, less than 4 hours away, when the financial trap I'd spent the past 3 days constructing would spring shut around the Blackwell empire. As the SUV pulled away from the mansion, I sent a single text message to Theodore Pierce. Execute. The war had begun. The war room hummed with activity as I entered the secure apartment at 9:30 p.m. Zara, Maya, Daniel, and Theodore Pierce were gathered around multiple screens displaying financial dashboards, legal documents, and surveillance. Feeds from the Blackwell estate. Status? I asked, setting down my purse and slipping off my heels. Phase 3 initialization confirmed, Zara reported. First National Business Bank has executed the debt transfer agreements. As of 20 minutes ago, your trust now controls all $400 million of the Blackwell's corporate loans. Theodore handed me a tablet displaying transaction confirmations. Pacific Northwest Federal has activated the credit line as well. The funds are available for immediate deployment. I nodded, scanning the surveillance feed where the Blackwells were visible in their dining room, engaged in heated discussion. Their expressions suggested dawning panic as they began to understand the severity of their situation. They're calling. They're banks, Daniel reported, monitoring their communications. First National is informing them of the debt transfer now. On screen, Thomas Blackwell's face contorted with shock as he lowered his phone. He spoke rapidly to Richard and Margaret, their expressions shifting from disbelief to alarm. Incoming call from Richard, Maya announced. I shook my head. Let it go to voicemail. He doesn't get to talk his way out of this. Their lawyers are trying to access the acquisition documents, Daniel continued, but I've locked them out of the system. Richard's texting now, Maya said, glancing at my personal phone which she was monitoring. Says it's urgent, that there's been a terrible misunderstanding, and they need to talk immediately. The only misunderstanding was mine, I replied coldly, believing their intentions were ever honorable. On another screen, financial alerts flashed as news of the Blackwell's debt restructuring began rippling through after-hours trading systems. Their publicly traded subsidiaries would open significantly down tomorrow once the market processed this upheaval. Time to deliver the terms, I said, squaring my shoulders. Theodore nodded, sending a prepared email to the Blackwell's legal team, their banks, and their board members simultaneously. The message was simple but devastating. The Keller Trust now controlled their corporate debt and was calling all loans due immediately unless new terms were agreed to by 8 a.m. tomorrow. They're receiving it now, Daniel reported, watching the surveillance feed where Thomas was checking his phone with visible agitation. The reaction was immediate and violent. Thomas slammed his hand on the dining table, Richard kicked a chair, and Margaret pressed her fingers to her temples in evident distress. Richard's calling his father's attorney, Daniel reported, monitoring their phone activity. The attorney is telling him there's nothing they can do. The debt transfer is legal and binding. I watched the unfolding chaos with detached clarity. 4 days ago, these people had sat in my office, smugly confident they could strip me of everything I'd built. Now they were frantically scrambling to save what they'd taken for granted for generations. Their options? I asked Theodore. Limited, he replied grimly. They can attempt to find alternative financing to pay off the loans, nearly impossible. Given their current financial state and the overnight deadline, they can declare bankruptcy, which would devastate their empire, or they can accept your terms, which they're receiving now, Maya added as another email was dispatched to the Blackwells. On screen, Thomas opened the document with shaking hands, Richard and Margaret reading over his shoulders. Their expressions shifted from desperation to confusion to outrage as they absorbed my demands. The Blackwell Group would divest all technology holdings, including the Robertson acquisition, selling them to Sentinel Security at market value. Thomas and Richard would resign from all leadership, positions in Blackwell Group companies, effective immediately. Margaret would step down from all corporate and charitable boards where she represented Blackwell interests. The family would issue a public statement acknowledging their attempted hostile takeover of Sentinel and apologizing for corporate espionage. The historic Blackwell estate and the family's ownership stake in Blackwell Tower would be transferred to a charitable foundation, with the Blackwells permitted to maintain residence for 1 year while relocating. In return, the loans would be restructured with favorable terms that would allow the remaining Blackwell assets to survive, albeit in drastically diminished form. They'll never agree to this, Zara said, reading the terms over my shoulder. It's essentially dismantling their entire empire. They don't have a choice, I replied. The alternative is complete financial collapse by midday tomorrow. The surveillance feed showed the Blackwells in various states of denial and rage. Richard was shouting. Thomas was frantically calling associates seeking financial rescue. And Margaret sat frozen, the aristocratic facade finally shattered. Richard's attempting to access your joint accounts, Daniel reported. I've already locked them down per your instructions. Incoming call from Thomas Blackwell, Maya announced. To your secure line. I exhaled slowly, centering myself. Put him on speaker. Thomas's voice filled the room, strained yet still attempting to project authority. Brynlee, this has gone far enough. Whatever point you're trying to make. This isn't about making a point, Thomas, I interrupted calmly. This is about consequences. You can't possibly expect us to accept these outrageous demands. His voice cracked with indignation. I expect you to make a business decision, I replied coldly. Accept the terms and salvage what you can, or lose everything by noon. Tomorrow, when your loans default and the banks call in all collateral. This is insanity, he sputtered. Where did you even get the resources to purchase our debt? The Keller Trust? We've never heard of any Keller fortune. That was by design, I said. My grandfather built safeguards to protect against exactly this type of predatory behavior. There was momentary silence. Then Thomas's voice returned, suddenly, cautious. Your grandfather was Edmund Keller? Yes. Another silence, longer this time. Edmund Keller's name still carried weight in certain financial circles, though his deliberate reclusiveness had kept him out of public consciousness. We need time, Thomas finally said, his tone markedly different. These terms would destroy everything my family has built over generations. You had no qualms about destroying what I built, I reminded him. Your signed agreement by 7 a.m. or the loans go into default at 8 a.m. when markets open. Good night, Thomas. I signaled Maya to end the call, then turned to Theodore. Make sure all documentation is in order for either outcome. Whether they sign or default, I want everything legally airtight. Already done, he assured me. The financial systems are prepared for either scenario. Daniel, maintain surveillance on all their communications. If they're attempting to find a last-minute rescue or planning anything desperate, I want to know immediately. He nodded, fingers flying across his keyboard. They're calling everyone in their network, but no one's offering help. Word of their impending collapse is spreading through back channels. And Richard? I asked quietly. Maya glanced at the monitor showing our penthouse surveillance. He just arrived home. He's packing a suitcase. I felt a momentary pang, not of regret, but of acknowledgement that 4 years of my life were ending definitively. Tonight. Have security ready to change the locks as soon as he leaves. Already arranged, Zara confirmed. For the next 2 hours, we monitored the Blackwells' increasingly desperate attempts to escape the trap. Thomas called every banker, investor, and business associate in his extensive network, but news of their precarious position had spread too quickly. No one was willing to risk hundreds of millions to rescue a sinking ship. Richard alternated between rage and desperate pleading in voicemails and texts, his messages evolving from threats to bargaining to finally begging for a conversation. I listened to each one dispassionately, recognizing the manipulation tactics for what they were. At midnight, as planned, Phase 3 completed with the formal registration of debt transfer with all regulatory authorities. The business press received anonymous tips about the Blackwells' financial crisis, ensuring the story would dominate tomorrow's business news alongside Sentinel's Pentagon contract announcement. They're running out of options, Theodore observed, watching Thomas slump in his study chair, the telephone abandoned, I expect they'll capitulate by morning. I nodded, feeling neither triumph nor satisfaction, only a cold clarity. Prepare both sets of documents, either their surrender or their bankruptcy filing. At 4:30 a.m., after a night of futile scrambling, the message came through from the Blackwell's attorney. They would accept the terms. By 6 a.m., Thomas and Richard arrived at the neutral location where Theodore had arranged for the signing, a private conference room at Pacific Northwest Federal Bank. Both men looked broken, their customary arrogance replaced by haggard defeat. "The documents are ready for signature," Theodore informed them, his professional demeanor betraying no emotion. Thomas looked up as I entered, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and humiliation. "You've destroyed us." "No, Thomas," I corrected him. Quietly. "You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided my company was yours for the taking." Richard hadn't spoken, his gaze fixed on the table. Now he looked up, face twisted with bitterness. "I never thought you capable of this level of ruthlessness." "I learned from the best," I replied, sliding the signature pages toward him. "Your family taught me exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." They signed each page in silence, formally surrendering the empire their family had built over generations. With each signature, generations of Blackwell power and prestige crumbled away, replaced by the stark reality of their new circumstances. When it was done, Theodore collected the documents, verifying each signature before nodding to me. "It's completed. The Blackwell Group as it existed is no more." I stood, gathering my belongings. "Your remaining assets will be restructured as outlined. You have 1 year to vacate the estate. I suggest you use the time wisely." "This isn't over," Thomas muttered, a final attempt at defiance. "It is," I replied, simply. "Your reputation in business circles is finished. Your influence in Seattle society is gone. Your name will be associated with corporate failure and attempted fraud. That's the legacy you've earned." As I walked toward the door, Richard called after me, his voice hollow. "Was any of it real? Us?" I paused, considering the question with genuine reflection. "I think it was, at the beginning, before your family's ambitions became more important than our marriage." "And now?" he asked. "Now it's a business transaction, completed to mutual dissatisfaction." I echoed his own words from our final confrontation. Isn't that how the Blackwells view all relationships? I left without waiting for his response, stepping into the early morning light where Zara waited with our car. "It's done?" she asked as we pulled away. "It's done," I confirmed. "The press release announcing Sentinel's Pentagon contract goes out in..." I checked my watch. 90 minutes. By market close today, our valuation will have tripled. And the Blackwells? Will be yesterday's news. A cautionary tale about overreach and hubris. We drove in silence for several minutes, the gravity of the night's events settling around us. Finally, Zara spoke. "What will you do now? With both Sentinel secure and your full inheritance activated?" I watched Seattle's skyline emerge from the morning mist, thinking of my grandfather's letter and its emphasis on choice. The Blackwells had lived their lives according to the obligations of legacy, trapped by expectations and appearances. My inheritance offered something they had never understood, the freedom to build rather than merely maintain. First, I'll secure Sentinel's future, expand our technical capabilities, develop the military contracts, perhaps acquire some complementary technologies. I smiled slightly, including a few promising ones from the former Blackwell portfolio. And, personally? I thought about the penthouse I'd shared with Richard, a space now emptied of his presence, but still filled with memories of a marriage built on calculation rather than love. I'll start over, I decided. New home, new perspective, new opportunities. My grandfather gave me the resources to shape my own destiny. It's time I use them to build something lasting, something meaningful beyond mere wealth or power. As our car passed the Blackwell Tower, soon to be renamed as part of the settlement, I felt the final weight of the past 4 years lift from my shoulders. The battle was over, the victory secured, and for the first time since discovering my in-laws' betrayal, I looked toward the future with genuine anticipation rather than strategic calculation. The Blackwells had demanded my business, thinking me defenseless. They never suspected they were declaring war on a dynasty far more powerful than their own. A dynasty of one, with the resources, resolve, and now the freedom to rewrite the rules entirely. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.